Hi friends, you're tuned in to Legal Means Business, a podcast by Leeway. We're joined by some amazing guests who help us identify how to take your legal function and career to the next level. I'm your host, Steph Smith, and we're talking all things legal ops and legal tech, as well as other critical skills needed to help you thrive in the evolving in-house arena. Don't forget, you can watch us on YouTube or listen on the go through Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy the conversation, please do hit subscribe and let us know what you think on social.
In that fast-paced environment, you need to be able to adapt to change. You need to be able to go with the flow and move in the direction that the company wants to move in. And when you've got a slimmed down legal function, the way that you do that is by being involved at that early stage, so you know as part of that decision-making process why decisions are being made, which allows you to be a facilitator for those decisions rather than being a source of friction.
When should legal teams get involved in projects? Traditionally, checking with legal was the last step in a business project. But we're now seeing legal teams become more and more integrated into the business. And when legal is embedded in the day-to-day running of a company, you can better manage risk and spot opportunities. So how can legal get involved at an earlier stage of the project? This is exactly what we're exploring in this episode with Adam Gibb. Following nearly a decade in private practice, Adam is now legal counsel at software company Ideagen. When he moved in-house, Adam realised the importance of having awareness and input from the outset of projects. And today, Adam shares his tips on how to get legal involved with business projects as early as possible. Adam, hello. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And thanks for having me. Yeah, it's all good here.
Yeah, good. And you're based in London?
Nottingham. Yeah, in
Nottingham.
The Midlands. So yeah, no, we have got an office in London, but the central hub here for Ideagen is in Nottingham, just outside the city centre. So where it all happens.
Very nice, very nice, super cool. Well, on the podcast, we tend to dive straight into we've got a good topic to explore today, I would say. I was going to mention first, I suppose we had a previous guest on the podcast, Megan Lutz, and she really articulated well the idea that there are three types of businesses when it comes to how they see legal in the business. And she said the first treats legal like a necessary evil. I think that certainly used to be the case for most businesses, perhaps. The second sees legal as an operational function, and the third sees legal and treats legal as a strategic business advisor. Can you relate to any of those? Does that resonate?
Yeah, no, definitely. Certainly the last two. I think that with the first one, I mean, I certainly know that there probably are businesses that do see legal as a necessary evil.
Yeah.
But that fortunately hasn't been my experience. Certainly seeing, and I think what we're probably going to come on to later it will become apparent that seeing legal as a strategic business partner, I think, is definitely the way forward.
And I think in the industry, I think the term strategic business partner is probably thrown around quite a lot now as we're moving faster towards this kind of new era of in-house legal. What does a strategic business partner mean to you? Because I know it can be a little different for everybody. Yeah,
I mean, I think, the role that I think any legal team really wants to play is seeing the legal issues and avoiding those becoming legal problems. So sort of being that strategic business partner, getting involved at an early stage means that you can identify all of those legal issues before they become a problem, and ideally, mitigate and avoid them ever becoming, a serious problem for the business.
Yeah, That's a great point, actually. I hadn't really thought about the sense that you almost shouldn't be scared of legal issues because they're not yet legal problems. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, any legal team really, we're there. We are there as a safety net for the business. You're there for things when they might go wrong, and things do go wrong. It is inevitable. But really, the role of a legal team, certainly a modern legal team, and definitely within the tech industry, you want to avoid the need for that safety net as far as possible and try and mitigate those problems as best you can.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I guess if you touched on it there about legal being involved as early as possible, why is that beneficial for both for the legal team and the business, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who has gone through the private practice to in-house route can appreciate that in-house, and certainly, again, I'm in-house at a tech company, so that's probably going to be the predominant focus of what I'm going to talk about. But certainly in the tech industry, things just move at a much quicker pace in-house.
For sure.
And, again, where companies want to keep the legal function slimmed down, as it were, in that fast-paced environment, you need to be able to adapt to change. You need to be able to go with the flow and move in the direction that the company wants to move in. And when you've got a slimmed down legal function, the way that you do that is by being involved at that early stage. So as part of that decision-making process, why decisions are being made, which allows you to be a facilitator for those decisions rather than, being a source of friction.
And does it help, I suppose, so it helps kind of streamline the process and mitigate risk before they arise. And I'm just wondering, does it help, legal have a broader perspective of the project as well, which can maybe pull in thoughts and considerations, maybe ideas that wouldn't necessarily fall under legal's remit traditionally?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time we're a sounding board for ideas and as part of that decision-making process. And it means that, we see it from a different point of view. My background in private practice was in disputes. So again, seeing things when they've gone wrong, you can sort of help and prepare and say, well, actually, if we do these are the consequences that might arise, or these are the events that we want to try and avoid. I don't think getting legal involved at an early stage in whatever strategy or project or decision-making process doesn't mean furnishing us with an intimate working knowledge of absolutely everything about that process. A high level approach works just as well. And certainly when you're slimmed down, you don't have the time to delve into too much of the detail. And I think sometimes lawyers, particularly ones that have been in private practice, and I can say this because I was there, we do have a tendency to sometimes become a little bit bogged down in the detail. And, you can try and avoid that, like I say, by having a high level overview of what that project or decision is going to be and the best way that we can assist.
And I want to come back to the consequences that you mentioned there, but I just want to flag, I love the term slimmed down legal team. I've never heard that before. It's a very, a very nice way to put it, I think.
No, I think, everything I think should be taken positively. I think looking at it as a slimmed down team, legal function, legal operation, whatever you want to call it, it's I think it's the right term. I think it avoids all of the potential negativity that comes with perhaps looking at it a different way.
Yeah, you're right. And there's a lot to be said, actually. And we've touched on it quite a lot during the podcast with probably almost all of the guests on, no matter what the topic is. It comes quite a lot down to mindset as well, and keeping that positive attitude, actually, because it really does influence the way that you operate and how you collaborate with other people, especially cross-functionally, I suppose.
No, and you're so right, building those relationships, especially if it is, use the word again, slim down, those relationships are going to be key. And like we said, you really don't want to be perceived as a blocker. I'm a firm believer of the legal team should have, the legal function should have what its intention is. And that should be aligned firmly with the perception that the business has of that team. If your intention is to be a facilitator, but the perception is that you're a blocker, that friction is there, and it's very difficult to then provide that meaningful advice. And when there's only a few of you in a team, having those key relationships with the key stakeholders in order to facilitate all of that and make sure that perception is aligned with your intention is important.
Yeah, that's a really great point, actually. How can you lessen the gap between your intention and the perception of the legal team?
I think part of it is the relationships that you build. So, having key stakeholders within the business, whether that's heads of department or certain managers that you deal with on a regular basis, who are going to help and come and know that they can come to you. And, like I mentioned earlier, you want people to feel like they can come and talk to you at an early stage, rather than sort of thinking, I'm not going to go and speak to legal because they might say no.
Yeah.
Which I think is, going back to what you said at the start, that necessary evil. You don't want that to be the perception. And a big way that you do that is forging those relationships. And there's no real reason now why those relationships can't be built, because I think because of the pandemic and everything, people are now much more connected virtually. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've obviously now back in the office, things are full flow, and you realise the benefit of actually being able to see people face to face, and that's another big part of it. But I think building those relationships with key stakeholders, laying the foundations. You want to be the first port of call. You don't want to be an afterthought.
To ensure that the business is motivated to get you, the legal team, involved as early as possible, it's important to lessen the gap between the intention of the legal department and the perception of the legal department. A great way to do this is by building strong relationships with key stakeholders across the business. Often, this means strengthening connections with heads of departments and sometimes project leads. Here are 5 tips to build strong relationships. 1. Know your position and play it well. What is the role of your legal team and the outcomes that you have to deliver? 2. Understand and acknowledge what's important to your stakeholders. Make an effort to ask your cross-functional peers about their priorities. This demonstrates your interest in their success and helps identify ways that you can better support them. 3. Show empathy towards others' challenges. This builds trust and mutual respect, helping stakeholders empathise with your legal challenges when they arise. 4. Communicate well. Actively share what the legal team is working on, as well as your strategies and ambitions. This will help create interest and build a willingness to collaborate. 5. Prioritise the relationships you want to build. Building relationships takes time, so which functions would it be most beneficial to have strong ties with? Prioritise these and build out from there. And just to bring it back, I got slightly sidetracked there by your fantastic slimming down term. But yes, back to in terms of legal being involved early in projects and with topics and the likes. What have you experienced any, or what are the potential consequences of legal not being involved earlier on? What issues might arise, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had any sort of negative issues, if you like, from legal not being involved. But I suppose the risk is that a decision gets made where legal ought to have been involved, and then take for instance, you've got your business is making a decision and it involves a number of your customers and their contracts. And if you haven't had somebody review those contracts, or at least say, hold on a second, let's just review these contracts. Everything might be fine, but let's just review them to make sure. If you haven't at least conducted the check, the risk is that you're going to take a decision that then does have some sort of impact on the customers, and that's the last thing the business wants. I suppose the way to try and avoid that is, like I say, being involved at an early stage, even if that is, as I say, just as a sounding board to to just be involved in that decision, or joining monthly, weekly update calls, not necessarily in any great function. You're not there to sort of say, okay, these are the legal implications, but you're just there in case they need to call on you. That avoids people then having to have a meeting, go away, think about it, realize that actually we do need to bring legal in, and have to have the same conversation again. Again, another risk, like you say, is by involving legal at a later stage, you might end up having to slow the process down, because you've got to go back maybe a few steps and look at the legal issues that could have been avoided. Personally, I join quite a few weekly and monthly updates with various teams around the business, just to sort of, like I say, not for any great legal purpose, but just either as another voice on the call. To sometimes, sometimes legal can be a voice of reason. Anything like that, but also just in case, if somebody says, oh, okay, maybe legal needs to be involved, you're there, you can jump in, it's immediate. And like I say, in that fast-paced environment where there's not many other people in the team, and maybe your time is precious just as much as everyone else's, that early intervention can save valuable time.
I've heard a lot of people have a lot of success by joining weekly or monthly meetings, actually, because as you say, you can jump in if people realize that they need some legal input. But equally and understandably, some people might not realize that a certain project or a certain activity would have legal implications. But you being there and having that awareness you can proactively jump in and prepare for that to avoid any issues, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the other ways that you can sort of get that knowledge is building those relationships, but then sort of keeping your ear to the ground, because sometimes, like you say, you aren't always the first thought as a legal team, because the business is, it's got so much going on, and especially, like I say, in a fast-paced environment when things move, decisions are having to be made at short notice or quickly. The first thought isn't, oh, let's pull legal in on this. But if you've got those relationships and you've built those relationships, sometimes passing conversations that you're having in a coffee shop with somebody that oh, how's that going? What's going on? What have you got on this week? What have you, is there anything coming up? And you can kind of break it. I find that you can break it down. So you can obviously have those big, like, an annual overview of the year. Let's say, the projects team, what have they got coming up over the next year? But then, you've kind of got that way in with that team, and you can say, right, okay, how's this project going? How's that going? Oh, would you like me to join that call? Sometimes you kind of got to put yourself on that call. You kind of, if something's going on and you think, okay, this might be going somewhere, it's gaining a bit of traction here, and maybe I need to be involved. You've kind of got to not be afraid to stand up and say, right, can I have an invite to that meeting?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of a double-pronged approach. I feel like you have to build those personal connections and break down the barriers and perception that, legal teams or legal people even are, not accessible, perhaps. So you're building those personal connections, which then enable you to, be involved on a more professional basis as well, with less friction, I suppose.
Yeah. I think an age-old thing is people buy from people, and that's the same with the legal team. You're not selling a product, you're selling a service. You're selling your advice, your knowledge, your strategic, your business plan. And if you have built those relationships and you've got those fundamental building blocks there, that process is going to be as frictionless as it can be.
And when legal's involved from an earlier stage, and you have this awareness of what's going on, and you hear from other teams, and I presume you probably have an appreciation for their objectives and their goals more as well, rather than having that kind of tunnel vision perspective. I guess the legal team's perception of a project, you have the full kind of holistic view rather than just one legal perception.
Yeah, I mean, any lawyer, I suppose, if you think of, I mean, I don't like to think of it this way, because I like to think of the business as a whole, but if you think of key stakeholders perhaps as your clients, and you want to get to know them, and you want to get to know their business, you want to get to know what their objectives are, you want to get to know what their motivators are, and that's going to help you make that decision. And like us, bringing it back to the topic, getting involved at an earlier stage, you've got more of an opportunity to understand, right, this is the process that we're looking at, or this is the strategy, this is the business decision we want to make. Understanding what has motivated, what the original objectives were, right at the start. You can always bring it back to that. You can always bring it back to that focus, which any department is going to want to see. And if you've not been involved, I suppose, looking at it from the other point of view, if you're involved at a later stage, you yourself have got to work twice as hard, but the other people have also got, you're going to be asking questions that people might have had to answer 3 or 4 times already throughout that process. And sometimes the decision is, look, we just want to make a decision. As lawyers, we often are like detailed focused, or we want time to maybe think about what the consequences might be. If you're involved at a later stage, well, if you say, okay, I'll take this offline because I just need to go away and look at this, time is important to everyone. So you can avoid causing potentially unnecessary delays by understanding what all of those motivators, those objectives were right at the start.
Yeah. And time is money in this situation, I suppose, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And I also feel it's quite it seems like a waste not to involve your legal team as early as possible, because I feel like, lawyers are very talented people, but your talents and your insights and the contributions that you could share expand way beyond just legal knowledge, I think. And the suggestions you could make, I suppose, would, of course, have the legal considerations, but I think people forget sometimes that lawyers can contribute more than just the legal aspects, I guess, which is a fresh pair of eyes. It makes all the difference sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's been certainly at law school and in studying, it's drilled into you, these transferable skills and the commercial awareness that you need. So you're absolutely right. That's something that permeates your training, all of that, right through to your practice. So yeah, it's definitely a good use of the legal team's skill and expertise to have them involved at the early stage and get them, like I say, even if it's just as a sounding board, just as a different voice in the room. We might have seen things that other people haven't. We might have a point of view. I think there's a general perception that the legal team can be more risk averse, and that may be true. In many cases, it is true. But equally, there's a reason why you have us, and there's a reason why we are risk adverse, and sometimes those things do need to be said. And if they're said, if they're said in the course of general discussion rather than in the course of, we've come to legal for a piece of advice, what is that advice, you look less, that perception, that intention and perception thing comes back, because that perception isn't going to be that you're saying no, or that you're saying, oh, we can't do it that way, but we can do it this way. The perception is going to be, okay, you're just another voice in the room. You're part of this decision-making process with us.
Yeah, that is a great point. It becomes much more of a discussion rather than a tick box, I suppose, exercise, which makes all the difference and makes it much more easy. Makes it easier to weigh up the pros and the cons of whatever route the business decides to go down, considering all the implications.
No, absolutely.
And we obviously talked about joining weekly or monthly meetings where possible. Are there any other kind of foundations that you need to lay in order to make sure legal is involved as early as possible? Or how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think if I had to sort of boil it down, it's laying those foundations is really building the relationship, building those key relationships, and then keeping your ear to the ground, making sure that you're identifying those legal issues. And I think it's a case of, especially in-house, being a little bit entrepreneurial with your approach and thinking outside the box as to where those issues might come from or what operational matters legal might touch allows you to maybe, again, if the perception is that the legal team is a bit of a silo, a bit of an island in the business, then I think you've got to not be afraid to step outside of that and go and make those contacts yourself. I sometimes see it as a bit of network, it's internal networking. When you're in private practice, you have to go out to events left, right and centre to build your client base. When you're in-house, everything's in-house. There's no reason why, set up a Teams meeting or a Zoom call and chat to people in the coffee shop, just and identify where those issues might be coming from, or what things the legal function might need to be involved with. And I think I said it before, don't be afraid to put yourself in the room. If you know something's going on, then ask for that invite to that meeting. Obviously, I appreciate sometimes it depends on your seniority and whether it is appropriate. But generally speaking, I don't think you're ever going to be criticised for asking for that invite if you think it's necessary.
Yeah, if anything, even if you are junior, surely it would make you, make a name for yourself. Show that you're proactive and passionate and keen to be involved.
Yeah, it never hurts to raise your profile.
So, practically, how can the legal team get involved earlier? Firstly, you need to build those key relationships, as we've discussed. Then, you need to prove that you're dedicated to achieving the collective mission. This means setting goals that are linked to the wider business goals and building trusted cross-functional dependencies. Next, think big picture. Maintain a holistic view of how your work fits into the wider strategy and keep this front of mind. Avoid those risk-averse legal blinkers. Lastly, think entrepreneurially. This means thinking outside the box, challenge conventional thinking, and presenting solutions anytime that you identify a legal issue. About yourself and Ideagen, are you implementing, you mentioned you go to these monthly meetings, are you exploring any other ways of being involved earlier, or are there any particular projects that you've experienced that it's great to be involved as early as possible, or what's your experience with this all?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I mentioned those sort of those points earlier is because they've all been things which have helped me in my career at Ideagen. And the reason why I'm part of those update calls is because of all of those things that I've just said, and then making sure that you follow through on those actions and raising. I think getting involved at an early stage goes hand in hand with that, raising your profile and making sure people know that you're there. Don't be afraid if you're new to the team to organise or ask and say, can you organise a few introductory calls, and have that list of what the legal function is or what your role is within the legal function, and make sure that people know. And then just keep checking in with people. It's always good, whether it's on a quarterly, monthly, however regularly it needs to be, to understand what key projects are coming up. Like I say, it's in a fast-paced environment, projects are coming up all of the time, and you have just got to be very proactive, I think, in your approach. It does require proactivity, certainly.
Yeah.
And yeah, if it's recognizing that maybe there are issues which don't require an immediate input, but depending on the direction that it takes, maybe you will be required. And like going back to my first point, you want to avoid those legal issues becoming legal problems.
And I think just being there and being present in whatever capacity that is, showing face virtually or physically, it does just break down those barriers and reminds people as well that legal is there and legal is part of the team, because you're there on a regular basis, not just, when shit hits the fan, as they say.
Yeah. Yes. No. Yeah. Definitely. It's you definitely. The last thing you want to be is an afterthought, and people are coming and saying, "Right, I've got this problem. Please, can you solve it?" Because it's often people are too busy. And if you're a slimmed down function, the last thing you want is a big legal problem on your desk. So if you want to avoid it as best you can.
Yeah, totally. And it sounds like it does come down to, building those connections, which is funny because the more conversations I have, the more it seems to come down to building those connections and those relationships, which I think I've heard some people who maybe perhaps don't appreciate the value of that as much, but when you experience it, there are some really tangible benefits of building those relationships, like streamlined processes, less friction, getting involved at an earlier stage, and all of those. I mean, they result in better legal outcomes, yes, but better business outcomes as well.
Yeah, it's definitely it's just much. I think I don't think legal is unique in that. I'm sure if we spoke to any of the departments, certainly here at Ideagen, one of the big mantras that we have here is community, and that permeates everything that we do. And building those relationships just makes everything run more smoothly. It just means that if you've got a call, you're catching up. It's, how was your weekend? Did you have a good holiday? Brilliant. Okay. And now let's get into whatever we're talking about, rather than, it being sort of an awkward hello. And then, I've got a question to ask you.
Yeah. I think we've all experienced that. Huh? I suppose just to finish up then, on building the relationships, do you have any kind of top tips on how you'd go about building those?
Yeah, I mean, I think really, I don't think there's much more to add. I definitely think, putting in time to make introductions at the start, and then making sure you foster and cultivate those relationships throughout your journey, throughout your career. And it is just things as simple as, checking in with people, catching up with people, and making sure that people know that you're there, people know that you're available, and also that you're somebody that they can, you want to be approachable, and just letting people know that, okay, if it is, I suppose the flip side of this is, if you have got a problem, they also shouldn't be afraid to come and ask you or tell you that they have got a problem. So I suppose if you realise that actually, okay, maybe we should have got legal on board at an earlier stage, you still shouldn't be afraid to come and ask. And I think that's important when you're building a relationship, is to make sure that people feel like they can come and talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cover all bases. Try to get involved as early as possible, but make sure that you're accessible enough so that people aren't ashamed when they haven't been proactive involved.
It's building relationships is definitely an organic thing. It's what works for you. There's definitely no one size fits all, but it's never going to do any harm to, and again, as we're in the process of going back to the office, it's making the effort to get away from your desk. We've got a coffee shop here at HR. And quite often it's, we need to catch up about this. Do you want to just meet in the coffee shop for 5 minutes? And, seeing somebody face to face as well as over Zoom or Teams, it just helps to add, I think, a little bit of a personal touch to those meetings. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, I think it's a really important topic though, because I think many teams and different projects and stuff, you do have certain automatic considerations, whether that be if you're the sales team, you might think about the marketing or, the finance department and stuff, but legal's maybe been lagging behind in terms of being an upfront thought for projects. So I think it's, as you say, very important and hugely beneficial, whether that be to spot legal issues or opportunities as well. So super important topic. So thank you so much for sharing.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh, not at all. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.